This is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage.
And I'm yawning, Nancy Richards.
Yes.
So,
Well, yeah, I mean, what is it, 8:15 now? Or this way past my usual bedtime these days.
no, we're gonna be sleeping.
Sleeping in the
No,
Forgotten
that
Borough.
doesn't mean it's gonna be a boring podcast. It just means that we're getting old and
We
we're
are.
in our blankets again, and we should sell like commemorative, like left in the Forgotten Borough, like cozies or something.
Yeah, we'll do one of those those onesie type blankets with the sleeves in them.
Yeah. What were they called? They used to sell them on TV. They were like they look like a big like onesie and you put it on the bed.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what that is. That's gonna bother me now.
Yeah. Oh, let's check.
Oh, a snuggie. That's what it's
It's a
called. A
snuggie. Thank
snuggie.
you.
Yes, a snuggie. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, a snuggie. So we could make them with the little left and forgotten borough logo. So
Well, and you have some exciting new news.
I do. I have a little snuggie on my knee. I have a little what when I rescue I have a new rescue, Jimmy, but I'm calling him Guillermo. So which I'm really thinking I'm gonna adopt him. So I'll have a dog for the first time in 2 years. Well, I've had Fosters, but I'll have without, since Edie and Eddie passed away. But let me tell you his story. He's Mexican. So so ICE might be coming looking for us. Okay. So
Make sure he's got his papers.
got his papers. They're in Spanish though, so I don't know if that's gonna help. But so his rescue name is Jimmy. So I was thinking of Jimmy Kimmel.
Hmm.
And then I was like, oh well, and I wanted to name him a Mexican name because he's from Tijuana. He's from the streets of Tijuana, and he. So I thought about like if he's my sidekick, then he could be Guillermo, like Jimmy Kimmel's sidekick is Guillermo. So
Oh,
there's
that's
a
good.
Spanish name. So that's where I got Guillermo from, and I go AKA Macho Man because when I was looking at his papers, his vaccination papers, it said sex, and next to sex, it said macho. And macho
I love
is
that.
male in Spanish. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I thought it was hombre. I
Me
don't know.
too. Yeah. Well, that's what
I
I
don't,
thought too.
I'm not
Yeah.
an expert on Spanish. So I was like, oh, Macho Man. So he's AKA Macho Man.
Okay. Well,
So
I saw him before, we started recording and he was wearing
I
his
would pick him
little
up, but he's sleeping on
he's
my knee.
sleeping.
So
Don't bother him.
he's
Yeah,
cute. So he
yeah,
is.
don't bother him. And if you follow Nancy on Instagram, you'll see he was at the open mic you did last night.
Yes, and he was actually very good at it too. He came on stage. He actually lied down next, like, because I remember I brought Eddie once to something and like, his ears were like, he freaked out. He couldn't handle music, but he was very good. So, except, he had a little bit of the run, so I had to keep running outside with him. So,
Is he,
um,
well, he was in his element though around other people?
yeah, he was good. So, he really was. So it's we had a couple of rough days going to work. I had the cam on him looking and he was howling for a while, but every day he's getting a little bit better being by himself, which is good. So I'm like, kid, you gotta do that. I have to go to work. I have to pay for you. So
Yeah.
um and then like I'm seriously like maybe I shouldn't get a dog yet. Maybe I should wait till I stop working. But I've always had a dog. So
Yeah,
um
you've always done it. I always, the times I've been to your house lately, you haven't had a dog, so every time I open the door, I'm like, I always want to make sure the dog doesn't get out, but I
yeah.
remember there was no dog, but
And
now
now there
there is.
is
Yeah, now there is.
little little Guillermo. So but he's like a Brussels Griffon. Um
That's the
it's the
breed.
Yes. Well, I don't think he's a pure because he's a, rescue dog, but that's what he looks like the most. Um he looks like the as good as it gets dog,
Mm-hmm.
Verdell. Remember the good as it gets?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have a little dog. It's my first little dog. Usually I mean, if it's gonna be mine, usually my dogs are bigger. So, this is a first.
Well, I'm happy. He seemed like, he's it seems like a good match so far.
Yes, it came with an orange sweater, so that was good. And it
Hmm.
came on an airplane, which is I wanted a dog that can go on an airplane. So,
And that's
uh,
very fitting for you as somebody who's a big traveler, to have a dog just flown in.
yes. So he works well on planes. So, and apparently gets along with other dogs and people. So that'll work. Because I want to f still foster. So
Okay, well that's good. Well,
I
that's good.
adopt him. I need a dog sitter for when we go see Don. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so but otherwise, he's good. He's very good. So we have a lot every week is lots to talk about in
Yeah.
the good old USA. So
We do, and lately we focused a lot on the national news and just international stuff as well. But we've had a big day here locally yesterday. So a judge handed down a decision at the New York State Supreme Court, which basically called for the redrawing of lines, district lines of Congressional District 11, which is, of course, our congressional district here on Staten Island, and it is currently
parts of Brooklyn.
yeah,
Yeah.
parts of southern Brooklyn, and it's currently represented by Nicole Maliotakis, who's the lone Republican here in New York City, and uh, it is, part of this effort to compete with the Republicans who earlier last year in the summer launched this redistricting blitz. And the Democrats have done that in several places. And here, since the legislature, we've sort of tied our hands here in New York with our amendments to the state constitution regarding mid-decade redistricting. A court challenge was probably the best way to go. And the legal argument was that uh, the way that the maps are currently drawn in this district could disenfranchise Black and Hispanic voters. And that was the legal argument. The judge agreed with that. And so by February 4th, the Independent Redistricting Commission has to come out with newly revamped district lines. And as part of the law here in New York, if the Independent Commission a cannot come up with the lines, then it goes to the full state legislature, and ultimately the governor would have to sign and approve any new lines that take place.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
A few years ago, the Republicans challenged, we had made new maps
right,
district, and the Republicans challenged and won,
right.
and and then had this current district that we have. So why do we win it now when they won it a few years ago? Like,
Because it was a different judge.
okay,
Now the judges that ruled in their favor back then are no longer on the bench.
oh,
And Kathy Hochul, that was, a Cuomo judge. Thanks, Andrew Cuomo.
oh,
And now Kathy Hochul got to replace those judges. And
okay.
so now the judges are different, and that's why, they took another shot at it right now, because we would have we would have a more realistic case about this. And so basically, the Elias Group, which is run by Mark Elias, who is an excellent election lawyer and just all things democracy. He was one of the people, he was one of the
Sorry.
lawyers. Yeah, he was one of the lawyers who challenged, who was on the other end of Trump's 2020 election challenges and helping to, secure that election. Um, this was his lawsuit. The firm that he's a part of filed this lawsuit, and they proposed, that's their proposed. There's no guarantee that they're going to get the one they propose, but the one that they propose would have Staten Island go into Lower Manhattan and parts of the Lower East Side, which would be go into what is currently Representative Dan Goldman's district. And that would pit, if Dan Goldman wins his primary against Brad Lander, that would pit Goldman against Maliotakis. Uh,
Ooh.
and so,
But but would he lose, would we combine the districts, or like part
yeah.
of his district would go to someone else and then he would that
Well, it would be, I think he would still keep most of his district. And so um, it would be good news for him too if Staten Island were to be included, because I think right now, if the district in his district, if it remains the same, I think he's looking at a potential primary defeat to Brad Lander. But if Staten Island is now included, Staten Island Democrats tend to go more centrist and establishment. And so he gets
what about
more.
Republicans? I mean,
Well, but in a primary, I mean,
oh,
in a primary, like in his primary against Brad
oh,
Lander,
I
I
see.
think,
And then
yeah, he would be, I think, saved by the fact that Staten Island would be included in that district, and so, at least in the primary process, but in a general election against Maliotakis, I think with the inclusion of parts of the Lower East Side, I think I don't, the Staten Island could vote for her and it wouldn't matter
okay.
because there would be so many on the lower Manhattan.
Well, yay for us. Well, if it gets rid of her, yay for us. But I'm technically I I don't know. I'm kind of I don't like gerrymandering, period. So I'm I know that Texas started this whole thing, the most recent barrage of gerrymandering. Texas started something and then it kind of uh other states are trying to, play, to kind of even up the till, but I just don't like it. And um I don't like Nicole Malliotakis at all, and I don't want her as my congresswoman. But I do feel that she made a couple of valid points on, local media today in regards to, we do run a competitive district, and we did have a Democrat, um, and he was not reelected. She won, so we do have abilities to go back and forth on Staten Island. I think we just don't run strong candidates, to be honest, in the Democratic Party. Um, so I just don't like gerrymandering, but I don't like her either. So I guess we'll take the win.
Well,
So
yeah. Well, and listen, Nicole Malliotakis, Crimea River, honestly. I mean, the first, you're on TV now talking about, fairness and elections and this and that. Meanwhile, your first votes ever in Congress were to decertify the results of a free and fair election in
she
2020
did.
in two states, in Arizona and in Pennsylvania, which meant that if you had your way, Nicole Malliotakis, the votes of millions of people would have been thrown out. And
Yeah,
so spare me, honestly, this outrage about gerrymandering and this and that. Fuck off, Nicole Malliotakis, because you would have thrown out millions of votes just to appease your senile, diapered, uh, wannabe dictator.
fearless lead. Oh, yes, and that man, he's not
Yeah.
even. He's even going beyond dictator. He's going on to like world emperor. So,
Oh yeah, well we'll get to that a little bit later, but as far as Nicole Malliotakis is concerned, those were your first votes in Congress, lady. I mean, and one of them, Pennsylvania, occurred after the mob ransacked your office and threatened to and killed cops and literally shit all over the halls of the Capitol. So spare me. Uh,
well,
and in it,
she doesn't vote in our way. Like she didn't vote for the healthcare extensions. I highly doubt she's going to vote for this bill that's going to determine how ICE money is spent.
Oh, she didn't. The vote took place today, and she voted.
Oh,
She voted for it. She voted for this bill because there were no changes to the funding of DHS, and
oh, okay. Yeah,
and
so
all but 8 Democrats voted against it, and the 8 Democrats are a bunch of pussies. I'm sorry, but Tom
I didn't know
Suozzi.
that vote. was already because I was
Yeah.
getting some text messages today to make phone calls and like call Jeffrey's office and stuff.
Yeah, but Jeffries actually said to the Democratic conference that he opposed any deal that did not change DHS funding, specifically as it related to ICE. And eight Democrats, including Henry Queller, who was pardoned by Trump earlier last year, and Tom Suozzi, who was just ugh, he voted in favor of this bill with the Republicans, along with six others. But the rest of the Democrats voted no, and uh, that's where it's going to go, and it's going to go to the Senate, and I'm sure it'll be the same eight senators who caved on the shutdown that will vote in favor of it. Um, but
This
just
will give ICE kind of carte blanche in regards to what they're accountable for.
Well, they already are. I mean, the big beautiful bill in July, which Nicole Maliotakis also voted for, gives them basically unlimited resources to do whatever they want. They are the most well-funded law enforcement agency in the entire country. So more than the FBI, more than any local police department, more than any local state police department, more than the Israeli military. And that's usually, and so they are the most, they have
That's
the
one
most,
fucking army.
yeah, that's the most, and so it's the most well-funded law enforcement agency in the country. And we'll get to that a little bit later too. But as you mentioned earlier, Nancy, that, I say to Nicole Maliotakis, again, your outrage about elections and fairness is rather selective, given that it was, your, idol, your false idol, Donald Trump, who started all of this with his call to Greg Abbott to find him five seats. And, now that Democrats are actually turning out to have the advantage in this redistricting blitz, now you're upset about it because Gavin Newsom got his five seats in California. Uh, Virginia is about to get three. Maryland is about to redraw their maps. Utah, the federal courts gave a seat to the Democrats in Utah. There are going to there's going to be a lot of other places that are going to be competitive for Democrats, and so now that the rules don't, now that you can't rig the rules to keep yourself in power, now you're upset about it, Nicole Maliotakis. Please, bullshit. TikTok, Nicole.
We'll see what happens. We'll see if she gets voted out.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't an automatic, she's out. She's still, people have to. I personally think that this is only going to kind of drum up more Republicans or people to show up to vote for her because I'm sure she's going to cry herself a river and she's going to get more people angry over this and they're going to turn out to vote for her. Uh, unless there's, we'll see how the district is mapped out. But if it helps, you know, get rid of her, good. But I honestly don't see it.
What?
I don't really see the redistricting because the majority of the district is Staten Island. So
Well,
um
Staten Island will be added to, another more liberal district, and that's what I think is going to happen. And um, you know, as Brett Kavanaugh said yesterday,
so this is where I also don't like gerrymandering because I think Staten Island has distinctive different needs than Lower Manhattan. I think being on an island, but unfortunately, we have to attach another piece of another borough because of our population. I think in regards to Brooklyn, South Brooklyn, what do we have in common? A lot of those people have come over to live in Staten Island. So,
yeah.
uh,
Well, I think, actually for many years, and many of our listeners may not remember this or know this, but for a long time, Staten Island did share a congressional district with Lower Manhattan. That was when Congressman Jack Murphy was our congressman.
Oh wow, that's a while
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, so it was a while ago, but that was what the district was back in those days, and so that's what I think that's the ideal thing. Now, that's not to say that when this district is redrawn by the independent commission, that will be what the lines are. It could be something different, and
It
so
might,
it,
maybe it might even favor her. You never know. We'll see how the lines are drawn or not favor. Like, why do we
yeah.
automatically think that
Because
because
because the legislature appoints the independent commission, and the legislature is dominated by Democrats. And oftentimes, what happens is that the independent commission is just kind of, it's either a rubber stamp, or if they can't come to lines that everybody agrees with on the commission, they'll pass it over to the legislature and they'll do it. And so, one way or another, I think this district will become more friendly to Democrats because of that process. And so that's, I
well,
think,
Democrats have a majority registered voters.
yeah.
So I I'm going to once again I'm elect stronger, you know, our Democratic leaders are sitting in cushy seats, so they're not going to run for this congressional seat. They're all happy in their own little safe positions. And nobody's running that can really,
Well, it depends on how the maps ultimately sort of play out, because
I mean,
again,
if Dan Goldman's going to be running for Congress, he'll be a competitive force against Nicole.
yes, he will. And
Um,
and if even if, Brad Lander wins his primary against Dan Goldman,
yeah,
I
he'll be
think
definitely more of
I
a
think
force.
yeah,
You
I
know,
think Brad Lander would also be competitive as well.
but we don't see any of our seasoned Democrats stepping up to run.
Well, it's a lot to ask somebody to run for Congress. I remember, you're mostly, for the most part, and this is past candidates for Congress have told me this, that for the most part, what they're doing is they're on the phone asking for money, or they're at a fundraiser raising money, or they are doing, so you don't really get a chance, especially if you're starting off as a first-time candidate, or if you are somebody who is just doing this all for the first time. You're just kind of learning how this all works. And mostly you're just raising money, and it's a lot. It's a lot to
Well,
ask
it's the
somebody to do.
congressional seat. Why aren't we, why isn't the Democratic leadership pushing one of our leaders to run this position? We have state government leaders, and then why isn't the next step them running for like the federal government? Because they like state politics? No, like be run,
Well,
you
it's
know.
well, it's easier, to figure out. I know for many years everybody was asking, although she's not in elected office anymore, they were asking Diane Savino to run, and
She should run, you
yeah.
know.
Well, she always, I've spoken to her about it, and she said that she is not, she doesn't like Washington politics, and I've spoken to other Democrats as well. They don't like Washington politics either. I remember many years ago, Rose was considering running against Michael Grimm when he was the congressman, and she also said she didn't particularly care for Washington politics. And I could understand the
That means
frustration.
they don't care for Washington politics.
Because in local government, things work a little bit more smoothly, especially in bodies like the city council or the assembly or the state senate where Democrats are in the majority. And it's much easier to bring home money to the
So
district.
we leave a Republican in the congressional seat who's going to,
Well,
support Donald Trump.
I'm just saying these are why they don't want to run for it. It's just, and I agree, it is
Well,
frustrating.
maybe we should, focus on, you know, nurturing some newer leadership in the Democratic Party.
Perhaps,
That-
but I think that as far as I know, The last person who was kind of a semi-incumbent that was considering a run for Congress was Michael Cusick. Um, but
That's a
yeah,
good name to put against Nicole. Like they both worked together in state government, so they were both in the assembly. So
mhm.
he definitely knows how she operates.
Yeah.
Um he would definitely be good. Like, hey, if the Democratic Party is listening, you know, let's, put someone who can beat her uh up against, put up a fight. Like, do they want to win? Like, I sometimes I feel like they don't really care if they win.
Well, it's also a hard, I've said this before on this podcast. There's been a hard right turn here, and it's always been kind of more conservative. I grew up here, so I remember that. But I also think
Yeah, we're
post-COVID,
definitely more conservative.
post-COVID, post 2020, post 2020, they are, it's hard and sometimes aggressive and violent right turn. And that's reflected in, the past presidential election and in the races since 2022. And I think that, a realistic way of defeating Nicole is adding new voters to the pool. Um, and that's what this redistricting does. And like I said, I said before we came on, I reached out to the Elias firm to come on and explain the legal reasoning for it. I know kind of the broad strokes as far as that the current lines devalue Black and Hispanic voters, and I would love to hear more about that from a legal point of view. So we have feelers out there for people who want to come on and from that law firm and explain more about that. But
Because Republicans can also argue, what about the Republican voter who's the minority voter? Like
mhm.
they don't get a chance or a say in politics as well. And they still are the minority group in regards to registered voters between Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, well, like I said,
So
I would be interested in hearing, what I want to know what they presented in court to make this case and ultimately to get this favorable decision. Now, any map I think that comes out is going to favor Democrats, and I'm sure there'll be challenges to it by the Republicans. But the judges that ruled in their favor last time around are not on the bench anymore. And the judges who are going to be deciding this at the state level are much more favorable uh, to Democrats. In addition, even if they go to the federal courts and even if it goes to the Supreme Court, this Supreme Court has made clear that they are okay with states doing whatever the fuck they want as far as redistricting. They allowed Texas to use those 5 seats. And they are, and so I don't see even this Supreme Court getting involved to say, well, this one seat has to be, you know,
well,
fair.
Donald Trump just may cancel the 2026 elections anyway. I've heard more and more political pundits they believe that might happen.
I
He'll
don't
use
know. I don't know if he's going to, because there's no, and I know it's kind of stupid to frame it this way, but I, there's no legal authority, even with the Insurrection Act, to cancel elections. But what he can do is he can fuck it up. He could uh, send ICE out into the streets to intimidate voters. This is what I believe. This is what this stepped up presence in places like Minneapolis is meant to do. And I think what he'll do is kind of a replay of 2020 in the sense that he'll try and influence and browbeat uh, local Republican officials on election certification boards to try not to certify the elections. That's what I think he'll do. I don't know, he doesn't have the power to outright cancel elections, but I think that's what he'll try and do.
We will see. Um, we will see. But, Democrats do need to win, and they need to win not just by drawing lines. They need to win by getting some balls and fighting, uh, on the merits of what the party stands for, which, you know, I don't really see happening a lot in the Democratic Party. Um,
I see,
so
I see pockets of it in certain places, and it's much more difficult when uh, we're in the minority in all three branches, really, if you count the Supreme Court. But it's much more difficult to do that when you're in the minority. But I've seen, Elizabeth Warren. I would recommend anybody listening to this listen to her speech from last week or the week before, where she talked about what the party needs to do. She laid out a very populist vision. She laid out a vision of kind of a Teddy Roosevelt reform capitalism. And I do think, I know people often view Bernie Sanders as the leader of that wing. I am more of an Elizabeth Warren Democrat because I believe in the policies that she has put forward. And and actually she got a call from Trump after that speech. And he called her and talked to her about different affordability proposals, which was actually quite surprising given that he's called her Pocahontas for years. And basically, uh,
he's nuts. You never know what the
yeah.
wind's gonna blow
Well,
with him.
he floated to Elizabeth Warren, at least according to her, he floated, a 10% cap on interest charges for credit cards.
Yes, he's
Yeah.
really looking to push that. And to be quite honest, I would not mind that being someone who's in a lot of credit card debt.
Yeah.
Um, and economists don't necessarily agree with that. I was listening today, they were saying that that could actually diminish people's availability to credit if with the who the banks will give credit to if
Yeah.
they have to cut rates like that. Um, I'm just looking to pay off, the my bills. I I pay my monthly bill and I can't pay it all, but and then I look and I go, I didn't buy anything this month. Why am I getting
Yeah.
charged $100?
Yeah.
And like this is happening on several cards. And so I'm I'm treading water.
Yeah.
I'm really,
I would recommend for anybody who is kind of seeking a new direction for the party to listen to that speech by Elizabeth Warren. It was at the DC Press Club last week, and it was terrific. She laid out a really populist vision. And I know, like I said, I know people view Bernie as kind of the leader. I would disagree. I think that
you can
Elizabeth,
have more than one,
oh,
person,
as, but I mean, as far as the policy impact and what's actually happened, I think he's laid out a vision, but I don't think he's done much about it. I think Elizabeth Warren, I mean, stood up to a president in her own party, Barack Obama, to kill the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a deal that would have screwed over workers, would have screwed over the environment, would have taken our labor laws and put it into this investor dispute settlement court, which basically is outside of any government's jurisdiction. And so that would have been very favorable to corporations. And she was the one who led the charge on that. She was also the one who created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She also basically is she also, as far as the staffing of the Biden administration and Treasury and the FTC, that's where Lena Khan came from. Elizabeth Warren strongly pushed her for the FTC job. So she's had more of a policy impact than Bernie has had. Bernie has created
you
this.
don't like Bernie. I know you don't like Bernie, so
Well, she's had
I,
more.
I never hear you say anything good about Bernie.
Well, as far as like what the policies are that he's actually gotten enacted, I can't think of any. I just listed a bunch of things that Elizabeth Warren has done to further the agenda that she's pushed, and I think she's better in that she's actually allowed for not allowed, maybe allowed's not the right word, but I would say she's okay with more moderate voices, whereas the Bernie supporters tend to drown out more moderate supporters. And and Elizabeth Warren talked about that in her post election 2020 book. And so I would encourage everybody to listen to that speech. You could YouTube it everywhere. It was really a comprehensive vision as far as the economic platform that Democrats should run on.
All right, so have a listen then on
Yeah.
YouTube.
and I can put that in the show notes too.
Yeah,
I'll
that would
put
be a good idea so people could
yeah.
actually have a listen. So, so speaking of like federal government, let's talk about what's happening with our president. He seems to have dropped a couple of bombs here and there this week.
Not
We have
literally, folks. Not
well,
literally. Not yet.
yeah, I mean, Greenland, there is quite the opposition to him him wanting to buy Greenland. Like he reminds me of a baby at a toy store who like there's a great meme where there's like a baby and points to something and the mom's like no and he just starts crying. And it's like he's pointing to Greenland and everyone's going no and he's crying and refuses to, you can't have that. It's not yours.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that meme. Yeah.
And it's absolutely right. And the people of, you know, then there's the other funny meme from where Alicia Silverstone, she's like, "Ew, get away from me."
Oh,
It's like
from Clueless.
America.
From
Yeah, from
Clueless. I love.
Clueless. Yeah.
Oh, that was the 90s were like a peak of our species. I love it.
Yes. But, they are a part of Denmark. They want to remain a part of Denmark. They don't want to be a part of America. And the United States has access to military bases, and because we're with NATO, so why are we disrupting I think he wants to get rid of NATO, honestly.
Well,
I don't think he wants to be a part of this alliance. I think he would be quite okay if this alliance dismantled after 80 years.
and I also think he has a worldview that's very similar, at least geopolitically, to Putin, in that, in his warped brain, he would be the one to control the Western Hemisphere, whereas, the Eastern Hemisphere would be divided between Putin and Xi Jinping. Uh,
Yes. And
and
then they
I,
have that peace board. And
yeah, well, he's got this phony peace board, it's about as valid as Trump University and Trump steaks and Trump ties, all of
the
which went
greatest board that ever existed. What are you talking about?
yeah. Well,
It's so great.
yeah, well,
No one's seen a board like that before.
I know, well, and he's got the most warmongerous people on the planet on it, like Bibi Netanyahu and Vladimir
And
Putin.
Putin, yes.
Yeah. And so it's, maybe if you actually want to pursue peace, you don't have some of the most, notorious war criminals on the planet on the
Exactly.
board. Yeah.
Like he is challenging the United Nations.
Well, yeah. And listen, I have legitimate criticisms of the United Nations. I often think it's more performative than anything else, but I think, a world order or so-called peace board that is, led by Trump and, some of the worst people on planet Earth is not going to do any good.
I blame Obama. I just blame Obama. If he didn't tell that joke at that White House correspondents'
Yeah.
dinner, this man would have never run for president. Everything he does is to get back at Barack Obama. He hates that guy.
Well,
Hates him.
it's
He
that, but
wants the Nobel Peace Prize because he got one, and he doesn't.
and I also think it's a little different. Mary Trump, Trump's niece, actually made an excellent point that the reason he wants the Nobel Peace Prize and the reason he's willing to accept a regifted version and the one and from Machado in Venezuela, and the reason he's putting his name on everything, it's just to fill this void that we all know is there. And he knows is there, even unconsciously, that he's not the things that he says he is. He's not the smartest. He's not the richest. He's not the this or the best or the strongest. And he knows that. And so everything that he does is to try and fill that void and to convince himself that he's all of those things, even though deep down he knows he's not.
That's how he looks at Barack Obama. He's so jealous.
Well,
Of
yeah, it's deep
And
insecurity.
and I in my theory too is his racism is the fact that a black man has achieved what he has in his office. And how dare the Nobel Peace Prize give the prize to Barack Obama, an African American and not Donald Trump, who has, how many wars did he end? Eight? I don't know. My
Well,
favorite,
he bombed 8 countries last year alone.
exactly.
Bombed
So,
and he's got weaponized, militarized goons in the streets of his own city, terrorizing and kidnapping people. Uh, you know, uh, but yet you want a prize for peace.
but he does, his insecurity of himself, he's, he dislikes Barack Obama. It's like, it's kind of like, it's a weird, like infatuation I feel with him. And when he made that joke about him, it infuriated him. And he's like now devoted his life to like it's like a lover got scorned, You know?
And Mary Trump also, raised the point that in her family, her grandfather she calls her grandfather a sociopath. That's Trump's father. And
Mhm.
he imparted all of those qualities onto Trump. Her father was Trump's older brother and, was actually, from what by all accounts, actually a kind, compassionate, decent person, which of course led to, the rest of the family seeing him as not worthy of inheriting the Trump mantle. And so it went to the dumber, the less achieved.
Was her father the one who was the alcoholic?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And in part, that's what fueled the alcoholism was just the total rejection by the family over just the
Well,
fact that he wasn't like a killer, he wasn't a sociopath, he wasn't the things that Donald is.
well, it's, this man is running our country.
I know, and
He's a therapist,
he's a
and
deep, well, men would rather take over Greenland than go to therapy. Like,
I
and
believe that. I've dated an Irishman, and he definitely would.
men would rather take over Greenland than go to therapy. And
That
I think just
should be on a
the
t-shirt.
yeah, well, the insanity of the speech itself, I think, was, off the
Davos.
chart. Yeah, even was off the charts, even for Trump. I mean, it was, he said first of all, he called Greenland Iceland like 5 times.
Yeah.
And then he
Six
said that
times.
they,
Yeah.
yeah. And he said, oh, they called me daddy. I don't know what this obsession is on the right with daddiness. I think it's maybe their closet gayness a lot of the times because Jesse Waters calls him daddy. That's the only one who I know that does that. Um, but
If you're Europe sitting in this room going, what the fuck is wrong with like this man? He's he's unhinged. And you know what's interesting is there was a man sitting in the back of the room smiling, and that was Gavin Newsom, who
yeah,
is at the forum. And I think Gavin, like, there was a comment, Stephen Smith. I don't really like Stephen Smith.
oh, that
Like,
life-size human toe.
ugh. He was all mad that he was there. He was saying that, it's okay that you criticize him like in the country, but when you're outside the country, you should never criticize the leader. And I was like, bullshit. I go, he was there making sure that Europe knows, like, look, this guy's only going to be here a few years and I'm going to run and we're still friends, okay?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, a few other governors were there too. I saw Andy Bashir was there too.
oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, and that's a good idea. Like, don't give up the ship. America, we still want to be friends. But I don't know. I think Donald Trump has damaged the relationships that the United States had with NATO and
Well, he's full of shit when he says that NATO is a one-sided alliance, and
yeah, that
when
is bullshit.
that is bullshit. And I'll tell you why. And
9/11.
9/11, the only time that that article of NATO was invoked was to help the United States respond to 9/11
Yeah.
with the initial invasion of Afghanistan. And so this is an alliance that has benefited us, that has brought peace and prosperity around the world. And so he's full of shit when he says that it's basically a one-sided alliance, and he still sort of views NATO as this, like, central bank that everybody contributes to. It's
Because
not.
they haven't paid up to the grifter. That's why. He
Yeah.
keeps telling, the American public that, we're getting ripped off, and people believe that. And they don't see the value of of this alliance. And that's dangerous. Some of the shit that he tells people that people believe in this country. Um, I mean, less and less people are, I think, starting to believe it because they're being able to see uh, the effects of what he's doing. And the fact of the matter is that we're not financially doing better, even though he says we are, but we're not. I'm not. Are you?
No,
You
well,
know?
and that's another unhinged speech he gave before Christmas, despite the fact that he's yelling at me and telling me to view it differently. I'm not, because I see the bills, I see the receipts, I see all of that every month. You can't embellish those. You can't lie about those. You can't. There's no spinning those. Those are things that are day-to-day realities for people in this country. And just his whole speech was just meandering. He was holding on at Davos, going back to Davos. He was holding on to the he was holding on to the podium with for dear life. I don't know what was going on. He had this fucking bruise on his hand that he's been trying to cover up using really bad makeup jobs, and which the White House says he hit his hand on the table. That is not a bruise you get from hitting your hand. That is, either an IV was there or something else was going on. But that's, surprise, they're lying. And so, uh, Marco, the Carney speech, it's terrible. I always confuse because his name is Mark Carney, the Canadian
Oh, you're thinking of
Mark Carney. I'm thinking of Ed Norton from The Honeymooners.
oh, okay.
And so yeah, Mark Carney made a really interesting speech. I've heard bits and pieces of it, but he said basically that the old rules don't apply anymore. And it was more, it was about Trump, but it was more of like I
And he
felt,
said that there was a rupture in
yeah.
a rupture. So it's not a change, it's a rupture. So that's not good. Canadians are looking to China to do business with. China is scooping up and economically, recouping what we're losing.
Well, yeah, and I felt like shame as an American hearing like what he had to say. It wasn't just about Trump. It was because what he basically said, and didn't mention Trump's name at all in his remarks, but he basically said we can't trust you anymore.
Yeah.
Basically said we cannot count on the United States anymore for anything. And I know some people would say, well, they shouldn't. Well, we're all on the same planet together. We all have to solve problems together. We have climate change, we have matters of war and peace. We have to exist in the world, and I would prefer to exist in the world with actors like Canada and Western Europe as opposed to dividing hemispheres among some of the worst people on the planet.
Well, I'm I'm concerned about our alliance. Uh, I just am, and it has to do with Trump. I mean, Trump is the one who's destroying this. I'm glad to see that there are people like Gavin Newsom in the background trying to say, look, and then also I think it was mostly a Republican delegation that went to Denmark to kind of, also say, look, we don't want this either. So you're once again seeing some cracks in his power here. People kind of going, no, that's not a good idea. And I think Europe stepping up to the game and showing up in Greenland and not publicly coddling him, you know, he's not invincible.
And they've tried that, and I think what was really jarring to me is to learn that NATO sent forces to Greenland to potentially serve as like a buffer against an American attack.
Which is fucked up.
Yeah,
Like,
because usually we're together. We're the good guys, and in this case, we're not. And so I was wondering, because you're more of a traveler than I am, but I was wondering like what the impact is going to be. Some people were saying that Europe might ban Americans traveling to Europe. I don't think that's going to happen. Do you think
I
that's
think
a
that I think it's well, it's going to hurt me like it's going to hurt people living, I think, in other European coun like living in other countries. I think you might see a backlash on American attacks on Americans because we'll definitely be the soft target. Americans, yeah, I see that happening. Like, and
you
not
see a ban?
necessarily like
You see a ban on American travelers?
no, I see attacks on travelers.
Yeah,
Because of the soft belly of, the vulnerability that we are like traveling.
yeah.
So there'll be a lot of heightened security kind of things, or surprise attacks. Um, and so that concerns me for someone that travels a lot. I'm already seeing restrictions on immigration. Um, like in Portugal, they've made it harder for Americans to come live there. Um, And so, in that aspect, I see tourism definitely taking a hit. And then and something else you're seeing in regards to, for example, Great Britain, the UK has issued like a visa for Americans. We didn't need one before. And, it's not a lot of money, but it's a step that you have to take in order to travel to the UK. You have to apply for a visa. So, it's definitely going to impede on traveling.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. And uh yeah, I mean I couldn't listen to the entire speech. I can't because he goes off into these dementia-ridden riddled loops that I have no idea where it's gonna go. And after a while you're just like, huh? Where did this end up? I don't
It's
know.
embarrassing. It's
Yeah.
just like, it's really embarrassing because this is the president of the United States. And he's going off on these tangents. And I wouldn't be, like Europe's really getting together now and going, I think we need to, think about ourselves and acting in that aspect because there's definitely a difference in ideology between the two. We've been able to have a cross-Atlantic alliance, but they think very differently than we do in the US in regards to how they treat their people, what they feel is important. Um,
Well, it's
but
they are much more acquainted with fascism there than they are with us, than
I
we are.
get
And
so
and so they know where this all leads. For most Americans, it's just something they've read about in a textbook. But for Europeans, they've lived it. And actually, they treat their far right parties the way that we should have treated Republicans. Like Marie Le Pen in France, like she appealed a ruling that said she was not eligible to run for president of France because she was embezzling. Her party was embezzling. She committed a crime, therefore you cannot run for high office. What a fucking concept. I didn't know that you could do that kind of thing. And
yeah,
so I think that we should adopt some of those reforms here. And she's
let's talk about
appealing she's appealing it. I don't know where it's going to go, but I think we should adopt some of those reforms and treat they treat a lot of the people there. They treat kind of the far right as like pariahs. They still treat them as marginalized
how
and
much
dangerous.
this president is getting away with embezzling. Like the money he's already with Venezuela, he's got in an offshore account, like a Swiss bank account. Like
Well, yeah, and well, not to mention his crypto schemes and getting Qatar a plane from Qatar.
airplanes and getting,
That's what
paid.
you have to do. You have to go in there and you have to, present him either with a trinket or an outright bribe to actually get something.
Yes.
And so that's what this is. It's just he's just very and he's nakedly transactional. And I think the biggest lie he told his supporters from 2016 on forward was, well, I can't be bought because I'm so rich. I can't be bought. Yes, you fucking can. And
Yes,
actually,
he's
and
very bought.
and
He's
and
very bought.
his net worth has increased by billions
Yeah,
in
his
this
personal network.
past year. And so, do you think that does not happen because, he's just so profitable? In fact, most of the things he's invested in or put his name on in his life have failed spectacularly. And the only reason that anybody is investing in anything he has to do that has to do with him now is because they believe that they'll get something out of it because he's president. It's pure influence peddling, and
They're
that's
not. You know,
yeah.
you don't hear much from his kids these days. I think because they're working the cash register in the background. They're working the till. That's why they're not up front in the office
Well,
because
Kushner
they're,
is Kushner is, going off and making
yeah,
these
he's
deals.
doing some silent, negotiational stuff. But you don't see them up front like you used to in Trump one. You're seeing a lot less of them. And I think because they are minding the till. They are collecting the money and funneling it into, Trump
Yeah, Trump,
University or
whatever,
whatever they're,
whatever the next scam is.
they're
I mean,
yeah.
whatever the next scam is, and poor Jimmy Carter had to put his peanut farm in a fucking trust before he entered the office. I mean, you know, so just how things have changed. But you mentioned before the cracks and in Trump's power and in Trump's support, and I was listening to the Daily podcast about kind of the year in review on the 20th of when
I
Trump
was
came back
listening
to
to
power.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and he views his power as infinite and nobody should question it. Why do we have these other branches of government essentially? And basically, we started to see that crack at the Supreme Court this week. Yesterday, there was a case before the court. Trump's been trying to fire Lisa Cook, a Fed board governor, and he's made up
Federal
bullshit.
Reserve Board. Right.
Yeah, and he's made up bullshit allegations about her, same ones as Tish James mortgage fraud, uh, none of which they've been able to successfully prove. And so Lisa Cook has challenged her dismissal, and it's been brought it to the Supreme Court. And I would say that every one of the justices, I listened to the arguments yesterday, every one of the justices, from the most liberal, Ketanji Brown Jackson, all the way to the most conservative, which I would say, and the most radicalized, which is Samuel Alito, they were all pretty skeptical of this move to try and fire Lisa Cook. On different fronts. One, there was concerns raised by a number of the justices about, you know, well, what has been the process to determine that she actually did something wrong? Number one, there was no process. It was just a Truth Social post. Number two, uh, Brett Kavanaugh made the point to say what goes around comes around, and in a few years there could be a new president, and might be a Democrat, and could that person, Gavin Newsom, whoever, fire Trump-appointed members of that board?
Right.
And
And yeah, they all kind of wanted to make this all very independent.
yeah,
The Federal Reserve independent from, you know, the federal, the political parties. And I was glad to hear that.
yeah, and they all and basically they challenged it on all angles, and and the questions I thought by Sonia Sotomayor were terrific about this. Ketanji Brown Jackson also did some really pointed questions as well, but I was also Neil Gorsuch was also very skeptical, and basically, one of them I think said, well, what are we doing here? If you haven't determined that there's actually been wrongdoing, what are we actually doing here? And so that effort seems likely to fail. They are likely to keep Lisa Cook on the Federal Reserve Board, at least for now. And um, there was, concerns because, uh, in countries with non-independent monetary systems, their economy goes to shit ultimately over time because economic decisions are made by whim and political circumstances.
Well, the market dipped dramatically yesterday when
Well,
Trump, first entered Davos.
yeah, well, I guess they saw him sundowning on stage and they were like, mm.
Well, it's based off of what he said. So,
Yeah,
the fact that he I'm trying to like trying I've been trying to think like where is this going? What is he doing? Like, just simply because of I'm thinking about my 401, like do I need to like remove certain things now and move them around? But he honestly believes that this like crash and burn, like the shake-up type of mentality is really going to benefit us I don't see it. I don't see how, because financial markets like stability.
Well, they do, and he's a toddler. He is a toddler and who loves to play the arsonist and the firefighter. Basically, and here's how that works. I'm going to say or do something really stupid. And then I'm going to go back on it. I'm going to taco. Trump always chickens out. And basically, we are going to, I'm going to pull out of it and I'm going to say that there was a great deal that was reached. And, I put out my own fire. And that's how I get attention. And
Yeah.
that's been the pattern in his political life, essentially. He did this a lot in term one as well. But that's basically been, what the pattern has been.
Well, I mean, the market was up a little bit today, but it dipped yesterday. I heard from a source that I read that, they're predicting a crash,
What kind when you say a crash, like is it like a recession type crash or
like a
1929?
stock market crash, like it takes a really big dip.
Like
Um,
1929 level or
Yeah, like in the 80s kind of, or something like that happened in 2008, 2000 or 2006. But um, yeah, it's in regards to what are we building? What kind of growth are we building? Are we just shaking things up? Eventually, you know, can you come
well,
back from that?
yeah, eventually
And
the
like
bubble
like
burst.
with friendships, financially, Steve Bannon may get his like knickers in a twist that, he's he's kind of, shaking everything up, but I just don't see the positivity in it. I was trying to find it if there was anything, but I just don't see it.
Well, if to the degree that Trump had, a semi-decent economy the first time around, and I think that's why he got reelected in 24. I think people remember the 2019 pre-COVID economy. Number one, that was a holdover economy from Barack Obama. But number two, there were people around Trump who limited the amount of damage he could do.
Yeah,
And this time around, he has total enablers
yeah.
at every level, and people who are even more radicalized and even more dumb than he is. And so I think that that's probably, that's the reason why things are the way they are. And I think people thought they were getting 2019 Trump economy with this, but that's not what's happened. We get 2020 economy plus every other shitty thing he's done.
And then, other people have benefited from what he's done, and it's wealthy people.
Well,
Uh,
it's the tech
I
companies,
just
billionaires.
hope that his base begins to really see that they're not benefiting from this. Aside from like the white national supremacy stuff, you know, really what are they get financially, people are not getting anything. And if they're looking at like, white power kind of stuff, you know, what good is that? Like what I just don't see how that makes things better.
Well,
Uh,
he said that civil rights reforms hurt white people. He said that recently in an interview with the New
oh
York
my God.
Times.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm sitting here with one of my local trolls who's, you know, uh, like I call Donald Trump a racist. He goes, "How's he a racist?" I go, "Well, why don't you start with the Central Park Five, New York Times ad?"
Well, even before that, why don't you start in the 1970s when he and his father were pretty openly discriminating against black families who were renting
Yes.
in their
Well, I was
buildings
thinking more of his dad for
yeah.
that, but
And they were sued. They were sued by the Nixon administration of all administrations to try and
Right.
stop it. And so it goes back a long way.
It does. And then when his response was, what are you talking about? I'm like, forget it. I'm not here to,
Well, they
I go,
thrive.
look into it. Look into the Central Park Five. Like, look at that ad. Look what he said. If you don't see how that's racist, then what do you want me to prove to you?
Well, they don't. They thrive on kind of the back and forth, and I've stopped talking to them because
Yeah, I don't answer. Like, why don't you answer me? I'm like, unlike you, I'm working right now. Okay.
yeah,
You don't have a job because you wouldn't get a vaccine, so you're sitting home.
yeah, that's a good response. You should say that.
So,
You should
like,
say it. Well, maybe they'll listen and they'll say it and they'll hear it. But like,
oh,
I,
gee.
yeah, no, I agree, and I think I don't talk to them because they don't want to hear or consider any other perspective. What they want is the back and forth. What they want is
Yeah,
just
they
they
want
want
the banter.
they
I
want the
do have a few friends that, I was good friends with, and I wouldn't, I don't know how to put them, but you see my posts. But I've just gotten to a point now where if you're defending what ICE is doing in Minneapolis, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Like, I just don't. I don't want to talk to you anymore. How can you defend that? You know? JD Vance came on the air today and defended, like that 5-year-old kid who they picked up, and he's like, you know, well, his father was an illegal immigrant, and he was detained, and what are we supposed to do? Leave that kid, hungry in the street? And that sounds like a rational theory, but he also leaves out a lot of the story where people had volunteered to take the kid,
well,
and they were like, no,
they
no, they did not allow like family members to take the kid. They detained the kid.
well, and they used him as bait too.
Yes,
They used him as bait
yes.
to lure the parents, and that's a disgusting, despicable thing. This burger Gestapo, these limp-dicked, fat stomach,
Every
like,
day I post so many things on my story
yeah. So
about instances about what I see. It's so disturbing. Like, and
well, these limp dick, fat stomach, low T, small penis fucking goons are just terrorizing people. There's no reason
they're
for
going in. There's now they're going in without warrants. Like,
they
where
dragged
is
that guy out.
Congress? You
Yeah,
know,
they dragged that guy out into the street with his boxers on, and it's the
Ugh.
the
And how is
cruelty.
the Congress not doing anything about this? Explain that to me. How is Congress okay with this? They're
Well,
not going in with a warrant. They're
I would ask those 8 Democrats who voted in favor of continuing DHS funding as it has been, with no cuts to ICE, to explain that. I would ask them to explain that
Who
because
are those 8 Democrats?
there were 8 Democrats. I mentioned a few of them before, but I think I put the whole thing on my story. Um, 8 Democrats that
And one of them was
voted.
our own Republican, Nicole Maliotakis.
Yeah, well, these are the 8 Democrats. So we've got Jared Golden. He's from Maine. We've got Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, Henry Queller. No,
And they're going into Maine now. They're
yeah,
going into Maine. That's their next stop.
yeah. I'm sure Susan Collins is deeply concerned. Um, so Henry Queller, no surprise there. Tom Swazi, ugh, the worst. Laura Gillen, Don Davis, and Vicente Gonzalez.
Laura Gillen is New Jersey, isn't she? Or
Maybe, I don't know.
yeah,
But
she's from
yeah, but one Republican actually voted no, and that was Thomas Massey. So good for Thomas Massey. Evidently we can't expect
What
that.
about Lawler? Wonder how he voted.
He voted, well, only one Republican voted no,
Oh,
and that was
okay.
Massey. Yeah, and so he voted for it. Of course he did. And he's somebody who he Mike Lawler cosplays a moderate but folds 80% of 90% of the time. And so yeah, I would ask those.
Nicole Maliotakis. And
I
so
would
what that does is that enables, ICE to continue to do what they're doing. There's no restrictions on what they're doing. Like, how can you fund, how is it okay that they can go into a house without a warrant? Is that just why? Because that slows up what it is you want to do? Or
Well, as far as,
maybe
as far as that's concerned, I think, we kind of planted the seeds for that kind of abuse a long time ago with the Patriot Act, because that law did create exceptions to the warrant rule. And so, especially when ICE was moved from justice to Homeland Security, that the Patriot Act created Homeland Security. And so I think that we planted the seeds for those kind of abuses a long time ago, and we need to rectify that.
well, we're certainly not going to with the way we're voting in Congress. So, people need to phone their congressional leaders up and tell them how they feel about what they're seeing in Minneapolis.
Well,
Um,
well, in Minneapolis, just to be clear, if we're talking about immigration, they don't have nearly the kind of immigrant
but they have
population.
Somalis, which, that's his new target of the month. And I think also Maine has the largest concentration of Somalians as well. So that's where they're going into Maine because of Somalians.
Yeah.
Like that, it's so racist. And that cop I not he was a sergeant, like he ran the police department in Minneapolis. He said that his police officers were being pulled over off duty, and he said none of the police officers that were being pulled over and be questioned for detained were white. They were all people of color, brown and black. And so that's the other racist shit that's happening. It's they're targeting certain groups of people, and we don't have a problem with that. No, because a lot of us are white nationalist supremacists. And so therefore, my Republican friends, if you support what is happening right now, you're a fucking racist. And you know you don't you want deportees, fine, then create limitations for how ICE can go about this.
Well,
I just can't fucking walk into someone's house
well,
like
if
without a warrant. That's like, what the fuck is that?
well, and if I hear one more time, oh, Barack Obama deported this amount, or Joe Biden deported this amount, or Bill Clinton deported this amount, they all used a legal process. They all used a legal process.
They didn't take a tree trunk, and knock the door down.
No. And so they all used a legal process to do it. And it was not driven by some sort of racist great replacement theory. And, you know, I I just think that I'm, like I said a few episodes ago, I am definitely now on the abolish ICE side. I was conflicted because I did think that we needed some way to enforce, immigration and doing all and to make and to get people who shouldn't be here out of the country. But just what they've done is very, it's like a shambolic version of the Gestapo.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, especially with how they're going about it now. So, definitely abolish ICE. Um,
And and we're going to stay on top of it, and we're going to hold those Democrats accountable who
and
voted
I
to
have to go to
clone
bed now.
them. Well, I do want to touch upon Jack Smith's testimony too, because that was pretty significant today. A friend of this podcast, Aquilino Ganel, was in the gallery there to support Jack Smith, as well as some of the other law enforcement
Yeah,
in the
I,
Capitol. They were there,
I
and
saw that. Oh, they just looked showing a photograph of uh
yeah.
Fanone.
Yeah, there was a physical altercation or almost physical altercation between Michael Fanone, one of the cops at the Capitol, and a right-wing podcaster. And to be fair to Michael Fanone and the other police officers who were at the Capitol, these men have been through hell. They've been doxxed, they've been dragged online, they've had their assailants pardoned by the president. They have been through so much. They have been through just absolute hell over these last few years. Many of them have injuries that render them incapable of working. And so, uh, and to have these fucking chodes online, like this right-wing podcaster, doxing them and doing all kinds of horrible things to them, they were pushed to their limit, and I understand that.
I'm just looking at what Michael Fanone is saying about, I don't know who the guy was, but he says this guy has threatened my family, threatened my children,
Yeah,
and um it was election denier
it's
that
a
was at the
it,
hearing.
yeah, it's some right-wing podcaster chode who said all kinds of horrible things about them, and I could understand them. I'm not advocating for physical violence, but I understand people going being pushed to their limit and by these absolute chodes online.
Sitting there like lying
Yeah.
as opposed to
Well,
what.
Michael Fanone was funny when one of the Republicans was questioning Jack Smith. He coughed in the audience. And he was like, "Bullshit." It
Yes,
was
I heard that.
funny. That was like, yeah, that was good. I like that. And Michael Fanone, if you're out there, we would love to have you on. But uh, Jack Smith's testimony was fact-based. It was uh, it was stuck to the legal arguments. And what was interesting is that the Republicans who were questioning him as a way to kind of make Trump look good, they were throwing the unindicted co-conspirators of the January 6th trial under the bus, like Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and Michael Flynn and John Eastman and Jeffrey Clark. They were throwing them all under the bus and said, "Well, why didn't you indict them too?" I heard a few Republican members of Congress on that committee ask that question. And so, they tried to throw it all under the bus and make them seem like, well, Trump was getting bad advice when, that argument doesn't hold up because everybody told him he lost that election. Some daughter told him he lost that election. And
So yeah.
so it
So
does.
no, I just I said, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep
No,
going.
yeah. No, and so Jack Smith, under all this kind of gaslighting and revisionist history, uh, stayed poised, and he wanted this public hearing. He was the one who said we should do this publicly because, and the Clintons have said that too, because they were subpoenaed under the Jeffrey
Well, they
Epstein
voted, people voted to make them in contempt of court.
in Congress, yeah, contempt of Congress. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel, and I have mixed feelings about that. I think maybe, they should, and I think maybe one of the things that they have said is that if we're doing this, we should do it publicly. And the reason that they should do it publicly for the Clintons and for Jack Smith and whoever else is because the Republicans will lie and they will put their own spin on it and they will tell their narrative. But if it's out in public, they can't do that.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. And I was listening to Jack Smith today, and I'd like to listen to what they're talking about. So I don't right now on MEC, but um, I just feel like it was he made a strong showing. I thought he was calm. I think he gave just factual information and made them see that they're what are they going after? You know, the man, he did something wrong and he went after it. And that's pretty much the story. And this wasn't because Biden asked him to.
no, in fact, Biden and Merrick Garland took great pains to separate the Justice Department from political considerations, probably to their disadvantage. But uh, yeah, so he made a strong showing. I could post that on our show notes too, the link to the entire testimony. It's a long video. It was about 8 hours or so. But I could post that if folks want to see it. And not to get too gay here, but he's quite the zaddy, Jack Smith.
Well, you talking about like good looking,
Oh yeah.
I was thinking Gavin Doom, like I was thinking he could be our new like, Thoreau, Canadian Thoreau if he becomes president.
Oh yeah.
He
So
looked, he went to go visit Ireland, so they were like, "Oh, hello." So,
yeah, yeah, he's getting a little bit grayer though, and so which is fine.
all right, still looks
Yeah.
good. But I like that he's going overseas, and I think this man is really thinking about
Oh, he is. He's absolutely
no.
going to run. Yeah, and he's the front
But
runner at this point. So
and the fact that he is kind of saying, "Look, this is a nut job. I'm a little bit more stable, and you know,
yeah.
take care of things." So I'm glad to see that. But
Well, yeah. Well, on that note, we're going to go to bed.
yeah, with our zaddies in our head.
Yeah, with Zaddy Jack Smith and Zaddy Gavin.
Yeah. Mm. So do that. All right. And
Well,
we'll
yeah,
see you next week. See what
yeah.
else is our fearless leader gonna
Well, we
bring
might
up.
be, we might be invading Colombia or Greenland or Canada. Who knows? I
Oh,
mean,
poor Cuba.
yeah, who knows? And
Actually,
so,
I'm just Cuba is, aside from whether what we're going to do, I don't know how they're surviving right now. So I'm really feeling for them. So
yeah,
on that note,
this is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage.
Nancy Richards, have a good night.